And now I'd like to begin today's presentation by introducing Gina Bongiovi. Gina is a Las Vegas, Nevada native and a graduate of UNLV with a BS/BA in marketing and a minor in business law with a JD MBA. In 2005, she started a marketing company and couldn't find a lawyer who was willing or able to help start up. After hearing similar stories from other entrepreneurs, she decided she would dedicate her solo law practice to helping small business owners sidestep the legal and operational pitfalls that might otherwise put them out of business. With business education and a real-world experience, Gina hopes to be a more value asset to business simply than another lawyer. And Gina, at this time, I will turn the webinar over to you.
Thank you, Keith. And thank you for everybody who registered for this. I hope that it's valuable to you. So I've got created my presentation on my Google Docs to highlight some of the uses that I'm using for some of the free options that are out there. So essentially, Keith went over my bio. I can add to that I built my practice from a marketing perspective almost exclusively through networking, which you may or may not be aware of is going to mixers and chamber events, introducing yourself to people. And currently, I've been in practice about 3 years, offering those outside general counsel services to small businesses. And about 60% of my referrals or of my new calls come from referrals from people I've met through networking, and about 40% comes through my website, which is pretty good for my website. Again, an average of about 800 visitors to my site every month, 65% of those being new and unique visitors, and about 1,800 total page views per month. So it's, as I'll explain later in the presentation, it's very important if you're striking out on your own to have good online presence. And the question I'm asked most often is, when do I start making money? So I'm divulging all of my financial information here. I started my practice in July of 2008. From 09 to 010, my net income increased 600%. And then from last year to this year, the first 6 months of last year over the first 6 months of this year, my net income's up 30%. There is a faster way to do that, which I will get into a little bit later. So this much I know is true after everything I've done and all my trials and errors, that it is possible to practice law with nothing more than a phone and a computer. And if you really want to cut corners, you could probably get away with neither one. What happens is, and what happened, I noticed for the small practice that I had joined when I graduated, which was comprised of 2 people I had gone to law school with who weren't gluttons for punishment to stick around another year for the MBA. So they struck out on their own and were a year ahead of me. But they came out with the office and the secretary and the big, Xerox fax machine or multifunction machine, and they wanted an office downtown and new cars and everything. And so they were right at the outset office poor. And to try to climb out of that hole is a very difficult thing to do. So the approach I took is I preferred to grow into the overhead rather than start out with it. So what I started out doing and what I do to this day is I work from home. I meet my clients primarily at their place of business or their offices, sometimes their homes, although I'm a little bit careful about that. I have a virtual office that has conference rooms available if I need to rent them. And quite honestly, a lot of my customers or a lot of my clients do their own business from Starbucks, and they don't seem to have a problem with me doing that. Now keep in mind, this is very practice area specific. If you are maybe looking at doing criminal law or bankruptcy or family law, you may have more of a need for an actual office or at least a conference room where you can meet people in private. I also answer my own phone and I do all my own work. However, in the last few weeks it's become painfully obvious that I'm reaching critical mass where I'm almost to capacity as far as my time goes and the work that's coming in, but I'm nowhere near my financial goals. So I have to make some decisions about my practice, whether I want to begin hiring associates or assistants or maybe raise my rates, which I really don't want to do, and price out of my market the very people I'm trying to help. So I'm hitting that point almost 3 years into it. Now, one of the questions, and I hate to ask this and be sort of Debbie Downer about it, but you really have to search your heart and soul whether owning your own business is for you. There are people in the world who are destined to be entrepreneurs and make terrible employees. I'm one of those people. And then there are people who are just happy being employees, coming to work, earning the paycheck, and being able to leave work at work. And knowing which sort of category you fall into is important if you're thinking of going out on your own, by your own volition and rather than by necessity. I know a lot of people are getting laid off. I know a lot of new law students coming out of school are being getting the bad news from career services that there are no positions. One of my best friends just graduated, and she called me yesterday and said career services says basically all the graduates are on their own. And the misnomer about owning your own business is, oh, you must have all your time off and all sorts of freedom and all sorts of things like that, which is very much not true. You live and eat and sleep and breathe your business. And I'm getting to the point again because I am the only person in the business that I need to make some decisions on that. So I sort of put together a pro and con list of whether owning a firm or any business really is right for you. And this comes from not only my own experience, but also working with small businesses as my clients and dealing with other attorneys who come to me for assistance in opening their own practices. The pros of owning your own business, you have complete autonomy, which is the most important thing for me, and the independence. And if I want to take a day off, I can. I, of course, pay for that later when the to-do list piles up. You can take the clients and matters that you want to take, which is something that I lacked in my previous position. I would do, a landlord-tenant intake, then a DUI, and a bankruptcy intake, and a custody dispute when really all I wanted to do was work with small businesses. And I was miserable in not being able to help the people I wanted to help and getting mired in things that I had no interest in. So that was one of the reasons why I went out on my own. It also affords you, if you have family, there are a lot of moms or dads or, parents with primary physical custody that go out on their own, and it allows you to work your schedule around your kids. And it also, you can create some agility with what you do. If you want to change something, if you want to redo your website, if you want to do you don't have the bureaucracy that you would with, sometimes even a boutique firm has a certain level of bureaucracy, and certainly a large firm, if anybody on the call is currently with a large firm, it takes forever to make a decision. It takes, sort of like trying to U-turn an aircraft carrier. But of course, there are two sides to every coin, and there are, of course, disadvantages to owning your own firm. And one of those disadvantages, ironically, is autonomy. Because unless you partner up with somebody, which has the potential to have its own host of problems, you are the rainmaker and you are the doer. You have to go out and get the business, and then you have to come back and do the work. And then you have to go back out and get the business, and then you have to come back and do the work. So you're constantly trying to fill the funnel and then do the work, and striking that balance can be pretty difficult. And you also need some sort of startup capital, and I'm going to go into detail on how much you need. And I know people on the call are from all over the country, so this is, of course, very Nevada and Las Vegas specific, but I've heard people say, you need 6 months of personal expenses in the bank. I'm not 100% sure that's accurate. But I'll go into more of that later. Another one of the cons is unpredictable income. I've, all through college and law school, worked as an independent contractor, so there was no such thing as predictable income anywhere in my history. And so it wasn't a big change for me to go from sort of a steady paycheck to no steady paycheck. But other people have a really hard time with that. I have a friend who works for one of the major grocery store chains, and he's been working there for 30 years, worked his way up from a bagger, and he recently told me he wanted to start his own business. And I said, can you live without that steady income that you've had for 30 years? And so that's one of the considerations he's making, which I'm not 100% sure he's ready for. And like I said, you must eat, sleep, and breathe your business. It's with you at night. It's with you in the morning. It follows you wherever you go, even if you go on vacation. Most of the time, even if you can technologically disconnect, mentally it's very difficult because it's your firm. And once you take that ownership of it, it's very difficult to either leave it in somebody else's hands or just put it on hold. And then the other thing, there's a concept working on the business as well as in the business. Working on the business is, your marketing and your positioning yourself to your clients and sort of the operational things, and then working in the business is, of course, doing the work. And again, striking that balance is very difficult. So like I said, whether you're going out on your own or considering going out on your own by choice or out of necessity, these are considerations that you should make, and it really isn't right for everybody. So, okay, so enough of the preachiness. So basically, here's how I've structured this presentation as far as choosing your practice area, your startup expenses, your law practice management processes, how to get your clients, and then how to get those clients to pay, handling your books, and keeping those clients, because one of the best sources of new business is current clients. Whether they're coming back to you for their own issues or whether they're referring people to you, keeping your current clients or your past clients happy is a great source of referrals. And it's one of those things, it takes 6 times or costs 6 times as much to get a new client as it does to keep an existing client, and that's very true, and those existing clients can be a source of referrals. And then I'll tell you how you can grow into your expenses or your overhead. So here's my income and expense by month for my first year of business. So for September 2008, on the left side of the screen, you can see that my expenses were very high because those were all startup costs and licensing and things like that. And then it wasn't until September 2009 that shifted in a significant way. So if you see there, and I don't want anybody on the call to panic quite yet, the first year's expenses were close to $24,000. I spent a lot. A lot of this graph here is trial and error, which I'm going to go into so that I can help you avoid the error part of that. So the first thing is choosing a practice area. I'm on the listserv SoloSays, which is an email listserv of solo practitioners across the country. There are about 3,500 of us, I believe, at last count, solo and small firm practitioners, and we share ideas and challenges and forms, and it's a wonderful resource. But one of the common questions that comes up is, how do you choose a practice area, especially if you're straight out of school or if you've been working for a firm and you hate every single day what you do? How do you choose what you want to do? Well, as Keith explained in my intro, I was a small business owner and couldn't find any help, and was business-oriented, business-minded, with the undergraduate degree in marketing and the JD MBA and all of that. So it was my practice area chose me. And I found a niche in the market out here in Vegas, and I stuck with it. And I made the conscious decision in the beginning to laser focus that practice area, which meant the very first Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce meeting I went to, where I introduced myself as an attorney and explained that I work for small businesses, I had probably a dozen people approach me at the end of the breakfast and say, I need your card, I need your help. And I was so excited and just giddy. I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be so easy. People are just flocking to me. And every single one of the dozen people had an issue that did not fall into working with small businesses. Custody disputes, bankruptcy, traffic tickets. So that was incredibly frustrating, but I made the conscious decision I'm just going to stick with it. And now it has paid off, and it started paying off probably a year into it, that people would call me and say, I've asked a half a dozen different people who they recommend as a lawyer for my small business, and every single one of them said you, which is about the highest compliment I could have received. Now, keeping in mind, so that's focusing your practice like that, and maybe it was my marketing background that informed that decision. The alternative is just a general practice firm. So you take everything that walks in the door to pay the bills, you take all those dozen business cards, and you figure out how to help them. You have a bankruptcy, I'll figure it out. You have a traffic ticket, I'll figure it out. And it's sort of two different, and of course you can choose a few practice areas, maybe bankruptcy and family law, or family law and estate planning. Those seem to go together. But each approach here has its pros and cons. With the laser focus, the good thing about that approach is that you can really zero in on your marketing. You can position yourself. As long as you commit to it, you can differentiate yourself from other practices, from other attorneys in your market, by really saying, no, I don't. Because it does say something to people when they come up to you and they ask you for something that you cannot help them with. And you say, no, I don't do that. I only do this, but I can find you somebody else to help you with that. It reinforces the fact that you do just whatever you do with people. And I think it provides you, and it at least has provided me an enriched market position down the road, because now I'm the go-to person in my area for this kind of work. However, that has not come easily. It's been a long road. It's been a lot of networking, a lot of trying to create seminars and trying to position myself as the expert. It takes a while to get there, and I had the benefit of doing that because my husband at the time worked full-time, and he helped support us as I established this practice. So I had the luxury of taking that approach. And it can be frustrating because you want, as you're trying to position yourself and as you're trying to find the marketing channels to reach your target clients or your sales force, which I'll explain later, you aren't making any money, you aren't finding the people you want to find, and the people who you don't want to find you are the ones who are finding you, and that can be really frustrating. And the thing about general practice, the good thing is that you're generating revenue almost immediately. You show up to almost everybody needs legal help, and especially if you do any sort of consumer law, bankruptcy and family law, and criminal and traffic tickets. So you can start, generating your revenue as soon as you hand out your business card. And if you're undecided on your practice area, if you sort of take a few things that you can become competent in and handle, you can get an idea of what you really enjoy doing. Of course, the flip side of that is that it's difficult to differentiate your practice from others because there are a lot of general practitioners out there. Big firms are normally general practice, even though they have people who are more focused in their areas. And then I've also heard feedback from other professionals that it can lead, if you walk up to somebody and you say, oh, I do everything, essentially, it can lead to a perceived lack of credibility, or they don't think that you can't possibly do everything. What do you mean you can do everything, or you handle everything? And the other thing is, of course, if you are going to take that leap and you want to become competent in all those areas, it can be very overwhelming, especially if you're straight out of school. I know I was terrified for about the first 6 months. I'd hide under my desk, waiting for the phone to ring, and then, it was just anxiety because I didn't know what was going to be on the other line and who was going to call, and it was very, very stressful. But anyway, once you choose your approach, then we look at the startup expenses. Now, this is whether you're forming an entity, you're banking your bar dues, your insurance, which your insurance is probably going to be your biggest expense your first year and maybe every year that you're in practice, depending on how you structure that. Your office, your law practice management, however you handle that, and then your marketing. Now, I'm going to say later on in the presentation that don't even bother with traditional advertising. So I pointed out my advertising expense. It was 12.5% of my first year's expenses. I had retooled my website and incorporated that into my advertising expense. And then I made all these failed attempts at marketing, which never panned out, and so I don't recommend traditional advertising, but I'll get to that later. So here are my books, basically. Of course, not all of them, but what I spent in the first 3 months of opening my doors. I spent about $9,000, but I didn't have to. So don't panic when you're thinking, oh my God, $9,000. I don't have $9,000. I have $9,000 now, and if I have it, it's got to go to my mortgage or my car payment. So what I did on the right side of the screen is I grayed out the things that you didn't really need. So really, all you really need when you're starting up is your business licenses, whether they're in that $500 includes my entity formation, I'm an LLC, my state business license for Nevada, my city business license, and of course all this is jurisdiction specific. However, some municipalities here in the area don't even have a requirement for business licenses for professionals, so I could save some money if I was in a different area, but that's neither here nor there. And then I dropped $300 into each of my bank accounts. My professional liability insurance, yeah, $2,400, and I shopped that like you wouldn't believe, so that was the biggest expense. And then my formation and my bar dues. So you can really do it with about $4,000, and that's in the first 3 months just getting started. And if you're able, your liability insurance may fluctuate drastically, quite honestly, depending on your practice area, your years of experience, how many practice areas you choose. So as far as licensing, one of the other debates that's commonly found on the listserv is whether to form an entity or whether to just operate as a sole proprietor. For me and for the business clients I serve, I don't know why any attorney would operate as a sole proprietor, and I've read the arguments, and I understand that, if you're the business anyway, your malpractice insurance is supposed to cover you, and there's really no sense in paying the extra money to be an entity. For me, the $400 a year it costs in Nevada for me to maintain my entity is totally worth it. Now, once you decide to form an entity, then the argument becomes, do you form an LLC, a corporation, a professional LLC, to protect you from the legal light, the piercing that corporate veil and all those concepts we all learned in law school. Now, as far as whether the P and the PLLC or the professional corporation, whether it's necessary, I did a little bit of research on this a couple years ago, and there are a lot of hoops you have to jump through in order to get that P, and nobody that I've come across seems to really care. So at least for me, it wasn't really necessary, but of course that's another jurisdiction specific. And I highly recommend that you meet with or check with a CPA on the tax advantages of how you are taxed as your entity. All these LLC, PLLC, corporation refer to your legal structure. And then you'll hear people say, oh, I formed an S corporation. Well, you can't really form an S corporation. You have to form an entity first and then elect to be taxed as an S corporation. And that's something that you want to check with a CPA before you even start out, because CPAs can help you make that decision in time, because you only have a certain amount of time to make that decision. And then if that time expires, you haven't made the decision, the IRS is not very forgiving on, oh, I didn't really file the proper paperwork in time. I thought when I first started my marketing company, when I was in the MBA program, which is what sent me down this road to begin with, I did it all myself, and I'm in law school and I can figure it out, and I screwed it up pretty bad. So I had been fighting with the IRS for about 3 years to make my subchapter S election retroactive. They finally gave it to me, and about a year later I shut the company down just because I started my law firm. So that's my top story. And then one of the biggest things you'll need, or one of the first pieces of information you'll need for all of these incorporation, everything, is your address, whether it's your home address, which can be publicized on Secretary of State's websites depending on what state you're in. I don't recommend you use your home address for certain practice areas, family law, criminal bankruptcy being first and foremost among them. A friend of mine does actually a combination of all three of those, and he recently got his concealed weapons permit here in Vegas, and he said, and I said, oh, is it the criminal clients that you have to worry about? And he said, no, it's actually the bankruptcy clients. So I thought that was kind of surprising. You can also go with a P.O. box or a box with the UPS store, but I know at least out here, some of the cities, the municipal licensing bureaus will not license a business that they know is in a P.O. box. And then the other alternative, which is what I use, is a virtual office. And that's a pretty good alternative, and I'll explain more about the virtual office a little bit later. As far as your liability insurance, this is probably going to be your biggest expense, like I said. Your state bar may have endorsed brokers that they work with for your state that may have discounts if you're a member of the bar or any sort of bar association associated with your state bar. Like I said, your premiums can vary. They can be all over the board depending on what practice area you choose. If you mark real estate as your insurance, you might as well just assume that your premiums are going to go through the roof. Intellectual property, I've heard too, is a very expensive practice area to insure. So the year 1, year 2, year 3 those are my premiums that I got. So the year 1 was, I think it was actually about $2,400. And then the second year I found a different broker who found me a premium for $745 through the same carrier. Now to get the carrier to give up that $2,500 premium and only take $745 was a lot of trouble that I had to go through, but it was completely worth it, and my broker managed to make that happen. And then when I was getting ready to renew year 3, I was so excited I, was paying almost a third. And then I got a letter from the carrier saying that they were no longer going to insure me because of adverse claim development in the state of Nevada, which apparently means this has become a litigious practice area, and they didn't want to deal with Nevada anymore. So I scrambled around trying to find quotes, and I got quotes from $2,500 to $25,000. That's not a typo. Quite honestly, $2,500 to $25,000 for a premium. And I said, I'm in my second full year of practice. I don't even make $25,000. So I managed to find somebody at the very last minute who could insure me for $2,500. the premium for $2,500. Definitely shop this around. Take your time, and you want, if you're looking to renew, if you're already in practice, you're looking to renew, you should shop this around at least 8 weeks before your policy expires, because it takes these brokers forever to get your, and first of all, it takes forever to fill out the application. Then it takes the brokers forever to shop the carriers. Then it takes them forever to get it back to you. And then you have to, sign all the paperwork and get it back. So it's a long lead time. And speaking of filling out the application, it will, if you've never filled out an application before, it asks you for every tiny little piece of information it's ever. I'm surprised they don't ask for your blood type on there, but they ask for you to allocate 100% to different practice areas. So how much of your practice is estate planning? How much of your practice is plaintiff's work? How much of your practice is criminal law? And one of the brokers let me know that the fewer practice areas you list, the better. The lower your premiums are, because it doesn't seem like you're trying to do too much. And it doesn't preclude you from accepting cases outside the areas that you designate. It just sort of keeps your premiums low. So if you focus a little bit more on it, that tends to help. And that's just a little trick I learned from a broker. As far as banking, once you get licensed and everything, you'll need 2 business accounts for your firm. And this may differ in jurisdictions. I think in some jurisdictions, IOLTAs are optional. But an IOLTA is interest on lawyer trust account, where it's an account where you hold client funds that aren't yet earned. All your retainers go in there. And I checked with Bar Counsel out here, and even I charge flat fees for everything. And even though in some jurisdictions you can put your flat fee right into your operating account, they said put it into your trust account until you've actually done the work, and then you can pull it out of your trust account. Check with your Bar Counsel on that. Those ethical rules differ according to jurisdiction too. But what happens is the interest on lawyer trust account, and not all banks offer these kinds of accounts, because a banker told me that they actually lose money on them, because at least they do out here, because the State Bar requires the interest rate that they pay on them to be so high that the bank loses money on offering them. And what happens is the client funds are in there, they earn whatever the dictated interest rate is, and then the interest that's earned on all of those monies go into legal aid funds to help disadvantaged people with legal help. So that's your IOLTA account. Your operating account is where, once you finish the work, or you do the work and you've earned the money, you transfer the money from the trust account into the operating account. And then you pay your business expenses out of the operating account only. Now remember, this is one of the biggest things that can get people disbarred. You can have a rampant cocaine addiction, and you can wrap your car around a pole with like a dead hooker in the trunk, and you're okay. You keep your license, but God forbid you are a couple nickels off on your trust account and you're gone. So keep in mind, this is very important. And if you walk into a bank and you say, do you handle IOLTA accounts, if you're in a state that has IOLTA accounts, and the banker looks at you quizzically, turn on your heel and walk out. It's not worth whatever they're promising to give you, free checks and free stamps and all that. Just walk out. Very important. This is one of the easiest ways to screw up a small law firm. The good thing about this is that banks love lawyers, because they see dollar signs. As you'll know when you get out on your own, banks love lawyers, financial planners love lawyers, so it's pretty easy to negotiate a free business checking account. As far as your office, this is my very humble opinion, but forget the marble and the mahogany and all this stuff. It may make you feel good, but the client walks in there and they go, oh my God, I got to pay for all this stuff. How much are they going to charge to be able to afford the leather-bound books and all that stuff? So. And again, this is something that you want to look at from the perspectives of your clients. If you're trying to serve clients who are multi-million-dollar businesses, actually, I can't really say that because I do serve multi-million-dollar businesses, but if you have clients that are looking for a certain image for their attorney, you have to adhere to that. And if you're dealing with clients, but keep in mind that the clients, when they come into that, they're not always incredibly impressed. They're usually like, oh gosh, and they're offering me, champagne and brie, and in the waiting room, I've got to pay for this. How much is their hourly rate? So here's how to do your office on a shoestring. You can do a virtual office, like I said earlier, which is what I have. And what it is a it's a complex, where the one I have is an office of physical offices, little, offices behind doors, but there is not one logo or brand or anything anywhere in the office. So when you walk into it, it could just as easily, all those offices could just as easily be mine as they could the other business, one of the other 300 businesses that are listed there. They give you a business address. They get all my mail. If I need them to, they will mail me my mail, which is the mail forwarding service. They have a receptionist there who answers the calls for everybody in the building, whether you're physically in the building or not. If you need the telephone answered, you can add on that service. They have conference rooms, day offices. If you are skilled enough to schedule your appointments all in one day, then you can just meet everybody there and rent the day office and not have to have an office that you're not always using. And what's nice about that is you can grow into those services without having to change your address every time. So if I want to add on the telephone, if I want to add on, I want to move into an office, I can move into an office there without having to change everything on my marketing and everything. Also potential for referrals, because if you are actually physically there, quite often you run into the other businesses that are there and you can get some referrals that way. So there are companies, nationwide companies where you just an intelligent office. There are also local companies that tend to be a little bit more flexible with their pricing. Executive suites are physical offices that are shared in a building, and oftentimes you'll have shared staff and shared common area. You share the copier, you share the fax machine, you share the little break room. The problem, or the potential problem with executive suites, is somebody will walk in there and see the lawyer, the CPA, the insurance agent, and think you're all in the same business. So if the insurance agent's an idiot, that's going to be sort of the imputed disqualification rule. His idiocy will be imputed to you because it gives the impression that you're all in the same office. So be careful with that. And then a traditional office, I like to think it's like inviting people to a wedding, because if you rent an office, then you probably have those common area maintenance fees that everybody shares. And then you need insurance, on the office and all your equipment in the office just in case somebody breaks in, and probably security. And then you'll need a receptionist because you're not going to be in the office all the time. And so it doesn't go from, oh, it's only $1,200 a month for rent. It goes from $1,200 to, $3,000 before you know it. So it's sort of like inviting, if we invite Aunt Margie, we got to invite Uncle Phil. And if we invite Uncle Phil, we got to invite Cousin Tony. And then a small, intimate 50-person wedding turns into 400 people. As far as your office equipment, like I said, you need a phone and a computer. If you're just getting out of law school, that computer, that workhorse that got you through law school will get you through your first year of practice. If you don't want to use your cell phone, I don't give out my cell phone number. I actually have a landline, which in hindsight I don't really think I needed. But I have a Google Voice number that I give out as my cell phone, because it's kind of awkward when clients say, oh, I'll just text you. And then I was telling them, well, I don't want to give you my cell phone number. So now I use a Google Voice number. And then you can grow into something like Ruby Receptionist, which is a virtual receptionist. They're an answering service. If you need somebody to answer your phone to give the impression that you are bigger than you are. If you want your computer, of course, I'm a big fan of Mac. And then if you want to, as you grow, the pieces of equipment I'm looking at, I'll list the pieces of equipment I have right now. I'm looking at my computer. I have my Fujitsu ScanSnap because I run a paperless office. And that's well worth every penny. I would probably pay $2,000 for that piece of equipment, but they run for about $500. You can usually find deals on those. I have my printer, sort of an HP printer I got free with my Mac. It's nothing fancy. My Dymo Twin Turbo label writer, which handles mailing labels and postage stamps. I have my little postage scale so that I don't have to go to the post office all the time. And then I have my landline phone. And that is and I have a shredder. So that's about it. Now, law practice management, there are a lot of different ways that you can manage your practice. If you want to do it for free, you can, it is possible to piece it together, which is what I did. For documents, if you don't even want to use Microsoft Office, you don't have to. You can use Google Docs. This presentation I created on Google Docs, which is a great, if you're collaborating with another attorney or a client on something, Google Docs is a great way to do that. So you're not emailing, 15 different versions of the document back and forth. OpenOffice is a word processing spreadsheet presentation suite that's open source. That's free. Email, you can use Gmail, but please, for the love of everything in the world, do not hand somebody a card that says joeblow@AOL.com or joeblow@yahoo.com. Go on GoDaddy and get a domain name for $7 a year, because people do. You may not think people look at that. People look at that. People look at, if you have a Gmail account, they go, you're an attorney and you have a Gmail account. Just even if you don't use it for anything other than your email, it's worth the little bit of money they charge for it. Like I said, you can use Google Voice for your phone. And the nice thing about Google Voice is when people call your Google Voice numbers, it will ring every other number that you list in your profile. If people call my Google Voice, it'll ring my office line, it'll ring my cell phone. If I had, I don't know why I would have another phone, but if I had one, it would ring that too. And then it transcribes the text, although I recently had a Russian client, and the transcription on that text was just hilarious. I think I'm going to save that for comedic purposes. And then for your finances, you can do the traditional Excel spreadsheet or even a handwritten ledger to track all your expenses. If you want to be frugal, spend a little bit of money, there are some, the new trend is the software as a service programs that are out there. LexisNexis came out recently with Firm Manager. There's another one called Clio, Rocket Matter, and those are web-based law practice management programs that you pay a monthly subscription for. So you're not actually downloading something to your machine that you might have to update. It's in the cloud. And then you can use QuickBooks. I use QuickBooks. And EchoSign, if it takes you a long time as you're doing your fee agreements when you sign up new clients, especially those of you who are already in practice, EchoSign is fantastic. It used to take me about 10 minutes to get a fee agreement out because I would create it in Word and print it to a PDF and email it. I use EchoSign, it takes me about 5 seconds. And then if you really want to splurge, you have the money, a couple grand, full spectrum law practice management software that includes your billing and even trust account management. And there are lots of those to do, but I've heard they're expensive to update. Sometimes you have to have an IT professional come out and handle them, and there's a learning curve involved. So I stayed away from those. You want to make sure that your processes are consistent. You want to implement those processes as much as you can at the beginning. If you've worked in a firm before, you're at an advantage because you know what works and what doesn't. If you're brand new out of school and you're trying to do processes, it's a little bit harder because you don't know what you don't know. So I kind of created a general, and this differs by practice area, client intake over the phone. You enter in their contact information so you can eventually do a conflicts check and to contact them in the future for marketing. Your consultation, whether you charge or don't charge is your choice. I didn't charge for consultations for the first 2.5 years. I only started charging in January, and I'm floored that people are paying it. So it helps, especially if I'm going to them and I have drive time and I'm going to their office and I can't help myself, but I give legal advice at consultations even though you're not supposed to. So at least I'm getting paid for it, and they feel like they're getting something out of it, hopefully. Engagement letters and non-engagement letters, you want to, for your malpractice insurance, clearly open and close that attorney-client relationship. Tie that off with an engagement letter to open and a non-engagement if you're deciding not to represent them, or a disengagement letter once you close that. Then you want to track your payment received. You deposit it into your IOLTA or your operating. For me, to make it easy, I throw everything into my IOLTA account and I transfer those funds once a month when I need to. Come up with your naming system for your files. If you're not using law practice management software, most law practice management stuff will handle that for you. When your work's completed, when you disengage, and when you transfer those funds from one account to the other. This is the and of course, like I said, this differs by practice area. I do 95% of my work is transactional. I don't do a whole lot of litigation. I actually use this handwritten spreadsheet because it has worked for me so far. The client, the assignment, when I sent the fee agreement and when I set the fee agreement to expire. Now, the reason I have my fee agreements expire is because it creates a little bit of a sense of urgency for the client. They feel like, oh my gosh, I got to make this decision, and then they're more likely to return it. And also because I originally, before I started applying a fee agreement or an expiration date, I would have clients coming back months and years down the road when I had changed my fees or when I decided I wasn't going to handle those kinds of cases anymore, and they would come back with the fee agreement and sign it and a check, and I thought, well, I don't want to do that for that anymore, and I don't really want to handle that anymore. When I received the fee agreement, when they paid the fee, how they paid, where it went, when the work was done, and I also send them an invoice out of QuickBooks. I send them a conclusion of services letter to tie off that attorney-client relationship, and then I make a date when I transfer the fee from the IOLTA account to the operating account. Now, like I said, there's all sorts of different law practice management software programs out there that handle things like this. This is an example of the Firm Manager intake, where you can create a memo and you have your communication type, and if somebody referred you, this is nice. This is something that you can't really piece together for free. And you can put all this in there, and then it automatically goes into your law practice management. So you can start that as soon as somebody calls, you open this up and take all the notes rather than having them try to remember all the information yourself, which I'm not very good at. As far as marketing, you can do your online marketing. I think is probably the least expensive and the most important. Everybody, I mean, what do you do when you meet a professional? You go immediately to their website. I want to know this person's credible. What does their website say? And if they have an HTML site that looks like it was done in about 1990, their credibility goes down. I'm sorry. I wish it wasn't that way, but it's true. Now, you don't have to spend a ton of money on a website. You can do a free WordPress blog. I highly recommend you eventually hire somebody who knows how to design a website. My guy does a search engine friendly website. I don't really do SEO. It's very hard to compete against some of the big firms that do SEO because they spend, 5 figures a month just doing SEO on their website. But my guy designed a search engine friendly site. So now when people Google Las Vegas small business lawyer, I come up #1, even above FindLaw, which is sort of miraculous to me. So I give him lots of credit. Thank you very much, Will. You want to put a contact form on your website. You don't want to put your email address on your website because there are bots that crawl around the web and they find email addresses and then they add them to spam lists. So just put a contact form. And then whether you create your own or have somebody else create it, use Google Analytics, which tells you all sorts of information about your traffic and what people are searching on, and then you can tweak your website every month or every week to better harness that traffic and turn them into clients. So Google Analytics is amazing. A blog, like I said, you can do free from WordPress. The nice thing about a blog is that you're giving people information. People perceive attorneys that we have all this information, we have our arms folded across our chest, and we're just not going to give it to you until you give us money. We're kind of like Zoltar on the movie Big. Like, I have all this information, I'm going to tell you your future, but you have to feed me with quarters. And so when you blog, you give some information, you position yourself as an expert or at least knowledgeable in your field. People feel like they kind of get to know you, they feel like you know what you're talking about, and they're more likely to call you up rather than, I think the days of advertising in the yellow pages and taking out the full page ad is sort of behind us. I also send out an email newsletter through Constant Contact, which costs me $30 a month, which is well worth it because every time I send out a newsletter, I have about 400 people in my database the newsletter goes out to, people I've met through networking, and I get at least half a dozen people that reply back with either a referral or a matter they want me to handle. So I think that's well worth it. And then social media, the guy that does my website sat me down one day and said, you have to get on Facebook, you have to get on Twitter, you have to get on LinkedIn. And I fought it, but I've gotten so much work from Facebook. Twitter sends me probably 80% of my incoming links to my website come from Twitter. And LinkedIn, I'm still trying to dig a little bit deeper on how I can use LinkedIn. But those have been really great sources of clients. You can also register in some jurisdictions for the State Bar Referral Service. Here it's $50 a year as long as you have liability insurance. I find that the clients that come through there are not always the best clients. I mean, not for lack of money or lack of, it always seems like they call me for something that I didn't list on the paper. So those are kind of hit or miss. Networking is a little bit more expensive, especially if you're joining chambers. You can network for free, but a lot of times you're also networking with other people who are networking for free, and if they're networking for free, they probably don't have any money. I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. So your primary goal in networking is to build relationships. So you want to seek quality of people, not quantity. You have people who show up to networking events, they run around, they collect cards from everybody, and then they go back to their office and spam you with all their crap. That's not what you want. You want to go, if you go to a networking event, you find 2 or 3 people that you really connect with, you say, I need to have coffee with you later, and we need to figure this out. And what the trick is with networking is you don't want to network and go into a chamber event and say, okay, I'm a family lawyer, and I'm going to go find somebody who needs a divorce. No, you want to go into a networking event and say, who deals with people who are getting divorced or who have family law issues? Well, everybody has family law issues, but you want to network with your sales force. So if you do estate planning, go network with funeral services. If you do probate especially, go network with funeral service companies. Other family lawyers are great resources for estate planners, marriage counselors. If you're doing family law, honestly, hairdressers and manicurists are the first people to find out there's trouble in a marriage. When you go to the Chamber of Commerce, those are good resources for immediate. If you don't know where to go to network, go to a Chamber of Commerce. And then when you get there, ask those people about other groups that they attend, because chances are people who are attending Chamber of Commerce events also do other networking, and they can give you the skinny on which ones are the ones worth attending. BNI and Latif are national companies, networking companies, and they do charge membership fees, and they do require you to bring referrals or to pass referrals to other members in your group, which I've read is an ethical violation in some jurisdictions. So be careful of those. I don't really like those groups very much myself. I know a lot of attorneys that get a lot of business out of those. I just don't really. I went to Catholic school all my life, and the rules, and you got to show up on time, and you got to wear a name tag, and you got to pass the referrals, and you have to stand up and ring the bell. I can't. I like start twitching, so it's not good for me. So I do. The Chamber of Commerce is big for me. Then traditional advertising is, I really think, kind of a waste of time and money. You need a substantial budget to conduct an effective campaign, because you have to touch people, you have to reach out to people 7 times before they even remember you, and then you got to. It's kind of a pain in the butt. And now as lawyers, we're subject to these advertising rules. So once you take a perfectly, beautifully composed and copywritten ad, and it's just breathtaking, and you know you're going to get all these clients, then you have to stamp in huge red letters, "This is an advertisement," and you have to put your phone number in a certain point font, and you have to do, so by the time you get done with all of that, it's going to get thrown in the trash anyway, or it's going to get, you have to scream to people that it's an advertisement. So to me, it negates it. And then you also have to be careful that you don't violate the solicitation rules. And then when you hang out your shingle, be prepared. Every single person who sells advertising will be ringing your phone off the hook. The most polite way I found to get out of these, if you don't have somebody screening your calls, is to say, you know what, I'm trying to make decisions on that right now. If you can send me some information, I will consider that when my budget allows for it, and I will give you a call back. And normally they're happy because they get off the phone too. And you want to consider your marketing efforts from your client's perspective, not from your perspective. So if your clients expect you to be on a bus stop, be on a bus stop, whether or not you want to be on a bus stop. Doesn't matter what you want. Now getting clients to pay. To me, always get your payment up front. Always, always, always. Attorneys are horrendous at collecting, and they work so far into receivables, it's not even funny. And quite honestly, you will probably never sue a client for fees, A, because it's almost a guaranteed bar complaint, and B, you have to disclose that when you apply for your insurance premiums go up. And clients, I believe nowadays, are starting to get hip to that. So they know that you're never going to sue them because they sort of have the advantage. So just get the fee up front, or get enough. If you don't bill a flat fee, get enough of a retainer up front. And there are a couple different ways you can bill. You can bill hourly, the traditional, get a retainer, bill an hourly rate, ask for more money. I bill flat fees because my clients can't budget for an hourly rate. A lot of people say you can base your flat fees on how long it actually takes you to do and multiply it by your hourly rate. It didn't really work for me, but you can try that out. And value billing is a new trend where you base the fee on the value of the service to the client instead of the time spent on it, but that takes a lot of experience to figure out, and it has to be sort of a definite thing. Evergreen retainers are great, especially if you're doing litigation. That's where the client gives you, say, a deposit of $5,000. You bill against that, and then you send them an invoice for, say, $3,000, and instead of taking that money out of the $5,000, they pay you $3,000, and you leave that $5,000 alone, which comes in really handy at the end of a lawsuit when you have to file a motion to withdraw and the client doesn't have any more money and you don't have any more money in the trust account. Then you're not working into the hole for a client. Now, whether you want to accept credit cards, I accept credit cards. If you don't accept credit cards, you run the risk of, bounced checks, clients who can't pay, and then you'll have the client who goes, oh, you know what, I can't pay. Is it okay if I pay you later? And you have, my heart goes out to some of my clients, and I want to help them, and I would extend credit, and I would get screwed. If you do accept credit cards and you have that conversation with the client, oh, I can't really pay the whole thing now. Can I make payments? Absolutely. You can make payments to Visa or MasterCard. Don't make payments to me. And then there's not really an argument left, so that takes that argument out of it. You can also work into your fee agreement that you can charge for additional work to charge the credit card, which helps. Now, the big warning I have, big warning, is make sure that the people who are processing your credit cards know that all the deposit that you should be able to find a company that allows you to choose whether you put the deposits into IOLTA or your operating account, but all the withdrawals and all the service fees and every other thing where money is taken out comes from your operating account. Now, I used a merchant processor in the beginning who prompts were up and down. They understood the difference, and then my bank went under, and so I transferred all my money from my IOLTA account into a new bank, knowing full well, of course, none of the bank service charges or the credit card charges are coming out of my IOLTA account. Well, they did after I transferred it, so not only did they take money they shouldn't have out of my IOLTA account, but it was overdrawn because the IOLTA account wasn't there anymore. So I had to fight, and then they wanted to charge me $500 for early termination fee, and I had to fight for about 9 months on that. I recommend using a credit card processor that understands the difference. The one I use is LawCharge. It's run by an attorney. She's out of Florida. Her name's Tracy Griffin. She understands how that goes. And then as far as managing your books, like I said, you can use handwritten ledgers, Excel spreadsheets, use QuickBooks. Be sure you understand Trust Accounting and QuickBooks if you don't hire a bookkeeper. And quite honestly, if you weren't a bookkeeper or a CPA in your previous life, and even if you were, hire a bookkeeper anyway, because that stuff, it's not the highest and best use of your time. It's probably not your strength. Delegate it. And if you want to splurge, there are law practice management software programs that handle all that stuff for you. And in anything, set aside your pride, delegate your weaknesses. I only recently got a bookkeeper, and it's about the best thing I've ever done. As far as keeping your clients, you want to return your calls. Failure to return calls is the #1 source of bar complaints, and the most common complaint I hear about people who are leaving their current attorney. Don't nickel and dime anybody. Do good work. Use your disengagement letter to open it up for future work. Hey, if there's anything else I can help you with, ask for referrals, keep in touch. And here are all the ways you can crawl before you walk. With your office, start out at home, go to a virtual office, go to an executive suite, with your phone. We kind of went over all this too. Marketing, you can do your free cards from Vistaprint, that's fine. 99designs.com will do a logo for you for a couple $100. And then once you get to the point, hire a graphic designer to do what you really want to do. This is a list of resources that I think are really important for solo and small firm practitioners. SoloSez being #1. Use a Gmail account. The one thing that you lose by opening your own firm is the ability to walk down the hall and bounce something off somebody else. SoloSez gives you that opportunity. You can post pretty much anything on there and get answers from 3,500 people of all different levels of experience, and I couldn't practice without it, honestly. There are a lot of emails that come through. Use a Gmail account to manage all the conversations. The 2 books, you may have heard of them, How to Start and Build a Law Practice by Jay Soonberg, Solo by Choice, which is another great book, and MyShingle.com, which is a website, Carolyn Elephant. There's also Solo Practice University, which offers online courses for people looking to start their own firms. The Mac Lawyer is a really great resource for people who are operating their firms on Macs, Virtual Receptionist. And then if you can afford it, it's well worth saving the money, putting the money in your piggy bank to go to the Solo and Small Firm Conference October 20th through 22nd in Denver. I met so many people, mostly from SoloSez, and I actually got a lot of referrals out of it, so it's worth going. I really appreciate everybody being on the call. I know I talked really fast, but I had a lot to cover. If you have any questions, feel free to either ask them now or email me, call me. I'm @LawyerGina on Twitter, and I'd be happy to answer any more questions. So I'll turn the presentation back over to Keith.
Thank you, Gina, for your very informative presentation. This does conclude the presentation portion of our webinar. As a reminder, if you do have any questions for Gina, please feel free to ask them via the questions pane located on your webinar control panel. And Gina, we have some questions coming in. Okay, first question we have here. What key points should a lawyer starting his or her own practice consider in purchasing malpractice insurance? Are there required minimums?
You may want to check with your state bar on that. There may be required minimums for the state bar. There may be required minimums for some clients you work with. When I first started, I basically determined the minimums, the aggregate minimum and everything based on what I could afford on the premium.
What law office practice software would you recommend for a Mac user?
For a Mac user, it's very difficult as a Mac user to find a software that's on your machine. I would recommend using something that's in the cloud, one of those software as a service programs. Clio is one, Rocket Matter is another. LexisNexis recently came out with Firm Manager. I had the opportunity to be part of the development of Firm Manager, so I'm sort of partial to that one. But what's nice is that you can use any of those web-based programs, regardless of whether you're a Mac or a PC. You can use those from wherever you are, which as a small firm lawyer, you may be traveling, and then you can access that information in the cloud with your iPad, your Zoom, your laptop, and then it's all hosted in the one place, so you don't have to worry about duplicating your effort.
Okay. Okay, here's a question. Do retainers have to be held in a trust account until earned, or may they be deposited into my operating account, subject to my duty to pay it back if not earned?
Retainer should always, okay, the difference, the term retainer is sort of a misnomer. There's a retainer, which is the traditional, I'm going to take your case, I need $2,500 from you against which I'll bill my hourly rate. That retainer always goes into your trust account because you haven't done anything to earn it yet. Now, in the rare situation, this was the example the Nevada Bar Council gave me, if you have a client, a famous athlete who has a PR problem and needs to file divorce or something, and they come to you and they say, I will give you $10,000 to drop everything you're doing right now, and I want you to handle this divorce for an additional however much you would charge to handle the divorce. That $10,000 for you to drop everything, for you to reserve your time and devote it to them, that's a true retainer, and that can go into your operating account. But when in doubt, always put it into your trust account and then only transfer it when you have actually earned it. Because like the asker said, if the client comes back and wants it refunded, you don't want to have already paid expenses out of that.
Okay. Another question. How did you build your form library / index for your practice?
Primarily through SoloSez. There is a document repository that we all contribute. We sort of pony up the dough to contribute on MyDocs Online. You can ask people on the listserv if they can share a form. You can use something like DocStock, but no, most of the things on DocStock are written by non-lawyers. And then there are publications. I have a book called Advising the Small Business that has forms in the back of it. There are a lot of different ways, and I built it from scratch. The firm that I was with for 6 months previously, I didn't take any forms with me. So it can be a long road, but there are resources out there, and the one that's free that comes to mind is the SoloSez listserv.
Okay. If you are a sole proprietor and not incorporated, what documents does the bank require to open an IOLTA account?
That usually differs by bank. They usually want, if you're a sole proprietor, they want a few additional documents to show. They usually will want possibly your bar card. Even as a sole proprietor, you will probably have to get a city business license, a local business license wherever you operate, and they'll want a copy of that. And then they may also want, I guess you wouldn't have an operating agreement as a sole proprietor, but usually the business license, you'll have to check with the bank. They all differ. Some of the national banks are really sticklers for certain things. And then they want to know where sometimes they want to know, I have a client that just started a firm, and they want to know that you have a physical address, that you're not just operating out of a P.O. box to open a business account. So sometimes they'll want that, and they may not only want your physical address, they may also want to see a lease agreement.
Okay. Why would you recommend a LLC over a small practice?
Well, an LLC is just the 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 type of entity that you can form. You can be an LLC that with one person, like I am. You can be an LLC with 2 people or 3 people, or if anybody, I'm a cook, so the company All-Clad that makes all the high-end cookware, they're an LLC. So an LLC can be any size. So I don't really understand the difference between an LLC and a small firm. The LLC is just the legal categorization, the kind of entity that you would form, no matter the size of your company.
Oh, she's saying a sole proprietor.
Oh, over a sole proprietor?
Yeah.
What the LLC does is it provides some protection. As a sole proprietor, you are no different from your business. So anybody coming after your business, if they're suing you for something, if they're suing you for malpractice, they can come after your personal assets unless you've formed an LLC and then you've operated your practice through that LLC.
Okay. That's going to conclude today's webinar. I would like to thank Gina Bongiovi for her expert advice on today's topic and to all of our attendees for taking time out of their busy day to join us.